Hi, I'm Lisa Goldberg, and welcome to the Right Mind, Right Weight Summit. I'm here today with Sandra Elia. Sandra is a certified food addiction counselor, a certified wellness coach, a radio show host, and the vice chair of the Toronto chapter of the Canadian Obesity Network. Welcome, Sandra. Great to have you here today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So I'm really interested in having this conversation with you because I haven't had a conversation really about what is food addiction, and what's the difference between a food addict and an emotional eater. But before we get into that conversation on, how to get free from food addiction, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started in the work that you do.
Sure. Well, my journey began over 13 years ago, and it's part of my story of recovery. So I was 29 years old. I was in a bad marriage. I was taking care of my mother who suffered from bipolar disorder, and she herself was a food addict and morbidly obese. And I was off work. I was like complete nervous breakdown. At 29 years old, I myself was over 260 pounds, and life was just something I could not master. I was done. And food for me at that time, even though food addiction was still a very new concept that was coming out, I knew it was my master. I knew it was a drug for me. It was my only source of comfort. It was the way that I got out of bed in the morning, the way I got through my day. Every upset, every stress, every celebration, everything led to food. The food was the answer to everything. And so what happened as well is when the day I started using food, which, was probably in my early teens, was also the day that I stopped maturing emotionally. Because as everybody else was learning how to deal with heartbreak or how to deal with bad grades, my answer, my solution was always to binge eat and to use food. So I'm, at 29 years old, here I am morbidly obese. I have no tools on how to even navigate a life because I've been eating through everything. So that was a rock bottom place for me. And I treated, I had gone to every diet center. I had gone to every gym looking for that miracle cure, that magic bullet. And I was even considering gastric bypass surgery at the time. But I knew that eating had nothing to do with hunger for me. It had nothing to do with the size of my stomach, and had everything to do with what was going on in my brain and how I was addicted to those foods. So I treated it like an addiction. And I really narrowed in on those foods that once I started eating them, I couldn't stop. And slowly, I came to realize that not having those foods is so much more easier than trying to negotiate when to have it, how much to have. Maybe have a little, maybe have a bite today. Maybe it'll be different. This time it won't move me to a binge. Whereas if I just don't touch it, then I can get to a place where it's safe and neutral. And so, and you hear this often in 12-step programs, I'm powerless over my drug. And what I believe is I'm powerless over the way certain foods react in my body. That's what I'm actually powerless over. So it's not that I'm powerless over food. I'm powerless over what happens when I ingest sugar. Something happens in my brain, something happens in my reward system, something happens that drives me to have massive cravings that I'm going to have to kind of white knuckle through. And I don't want to live like that anymore. I actually want to live where food returns to its natural purpose, which is to nourish me and give me fuel. And so that's the kind of way I look at food now. Is this food that I'm about to eat, is it going to trigger me? Is it going to keep me hungry all day? Or is this food going to keep me safe and neutral and nourished for the rest of the day? And I love being in that space right now in my life.
Yeah, no, it sounds like a great place to be, especially with the struggle that you had at such a young age. Mm-hmm. So first of all, thank you for being such an inspiration to people who are listening, that they can come out on the other side if they do have a food addiction. But could you define food addiction for us, or what a food addict is? Because there's a lot of people who will be listening to the summit that may struggle with food, but they might not be an actual food addict. And there's probably a lot of people who think they're a food addict. So, I don't know if there's like a clear definition, but if there is, could you explain to us what that is?
Oh, for sure. And what some people will tell you, I was born a food addict, and other people will tell you that it was a ramp up to it. And so sometimes You can start as an overeater, right? And who's not an overeater? Who doesn't overindulge at celebrations? Who doesn't, sometimes overindulge when they're upset for comfort? Those people tend to feel the consequences of that meal and go, oof, that didn't feel so good. Like I had my weekend blowout with the girls, but wow, I'm looking forward to my kale salad this afternoon, and I'm just getting back on track because that was nice, but it's done. And then you have the emotional eater, right? And usually if their lives are in a lot of turmoil, then they're turning to food all the time for comfort. And then it becomes problematic, right? And so most people generally don't seek help until it's problematic. So they're starting to gain a lot of weight. They have health consequences. Maybe it's impacting their work. I know for myself and for a lot of other food addicts, when you're really in the food, you show up for life in a very different way. I say we're all vibrating beings. And when you're so in that food, you're vibrating this, for me at least, it was self-hatred and disgust and judgment. And then that's all I found in the world. It was always reflected back to me. So if you're an emotional eater in a lot of turmoil, that can really ramp you up to becoming a food addict. And so with a food addict, we're talking about your brain chemistry. So we have three neurotransmitters. Thank you. In our brains. And so it's dopamine, serotonin, and endorphins. So dopamine is really very much connected to addiction. It's that desire, that thing that kind of gets you up in the morning and curious about life. And so, a lot of people often feel the high even before they ingest the drugs. That's the dopamine. And then there's serotonin, which we all know is comfort and love and community. And then endorphins, they get you through a pinch. They're a pain reliever. They numb you out. Well, we now know that food will elevate all of those in your brain, all of them. And it's so interesting. I didn't know this 13 years ago, but certainly I was always chasing endorphins because I wanted to be numb and I wanted to feel absolutely no pain. That's why I would binge, so I could numb out. So that's what I was raising in my brain. But dopamine especially is a really highly addictive neurochemical substance in our brain. And when we pour too much dopamine into our brain, so that's ingesting these highly processed foods, our dopamine receptors become deficient. Just like with insulin resistance, we can become dopamine resistant. And so what used to take, before it was, I'd have a slice of cake and feel fine. Now I need 3 slices of cake to feel fine. And now I can't stop till all the cake is gone. And that's because your dopamine receptors have just been completely fatigued. So for a food addict, it's really about chasing that high, that rush. You become not only before you may have been a food abuser, now you are a food dependent. And a real hallmark of a food addict is when you stop the sugar and you stop the flour products and you start feeling withdrawal. And if you feel withdrawal, then that means you are likely a food addict. Similarly with alcohol, there are people who will go out and enjoy drinking, maybe even, once in a while have a whole bottle of wine, but then they don't drink again for 3 weeks. They're not going through withdrawal. They're actually like, that was fun on Saturday night. I liked it. I enjoyed it. And now for maybe a month, I'm not going to do it, but they're not experiencing withdrawal. So withdrawal is actually part of the addiction loop. Because you make a decision, I don't want to have this stuff anymore. Day 3, the cravings, the withdrawal hits a high peak. That's why most diets fail at day 3. And in the addict's mind, you think I can't live like this. I can't withstand this pain. I've got to give in. But the truth is, like a craving, I always say, nothing in nature is permanent, including a craving. And everything in nature arises, peaks, and falls away. And if we can somehow withstand that peak, we're going to make it over to the other side. So for food addiction, it's based in our brains. It's based in our reward system. It has changed. Food has become more highly addictive, certainly in the last 50, 60 years. So if you think about it, I think man has been on Earth 200 or 400,000 years. And how our food supply has changed in the last 70 years, which perfectly aligns with the obesity crisis that we're facing. So the food industry is actually putting in a ton of research, a ton of money into making food highly, highly addictive because they want the biggest share of your wallet. So they're doing research and science. I know that they take people and they put electrodes on their head and they give them food. And what they're doing is not only studying to see how your reward center lights up, because they want to hit a bliss point, and they know the bliss point is fat, sugar, and flour. But they want to make sure you have the right crunch, because crunch is addictive, the right melt. And if it's not right, if they don't hit bliss point, they take that food, well, it's not really food, there's not much food, and they add more chemical and add more chemical and add more chemical, and then retest on people to make sure that they're overwhelming your reward center. And when we overwhelm our reward center, we become addicted.
Wow. So that's kind of really scary that our food companies have a major hand in getting people addicted to food, and people have no idea.
None. And the scary part for me is that we're feeding this food to our children, not knowing that, we're setting them up. It's no different than, if I put my daughter, she's 6 now, but when she was younger, if I put my daughter in a high chair and I was feeding her Timbits and she was going crazy, everyone would chuckle and think it was funny. And if I put her in a high chair and I gave her a pack of cigarettes and let her smoke, people would be calling the authorities, right? But it's actually not different. And so what we're doing with our kids is we're exposing them to these, and I like to call them chemically engineered food-like substances. I'm exposing them to her regularly, consistently, and she'll want more and more because you build a tolerance. And then eventually we're creating food addicts, because back in my day, 15, 20 years ago, most food addicts were born out of trauma in childhood. Trauma in childhood and addiction often go hand in hand. Today, we're seeing teens fully addicted to food with nothing that we would consider extraordinary trauma in their childhood. Everyone has, rough bits in their childhood, but we're not seeing it in the same level as we used to, because we're just giving them the cocaine in small batches consistently.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I see that often. I live here in New York City, and I've noticed a lot of teenage girls walking around drinking their Starbucks. It probably has those pumps of syrup in it.
Yeah.
But I'm also seeing a lot of teenage girls with a lot of, belly fat around their middle. And that's from all of these sugary drinks that people drink, probably daily, thinking, well, it's just a coffee.
Yeah. So that belly fat is actually the most dangerous fat. If we carry our fat in our butt and our thighs, we're actually quite healthy, which is exciting for me because that's my exact figure. And small, waist circumference as opposed to weight is now becoming the new measure of health. We're kind of letting go of BMIs and we're looking at waist circumferences. So what happens is when you have a lot of insulin running through your body, which is a result of eating too much sugar, and your body doesn't know what to do with all that insulin, it's also a fat hoarding hormone. So it just gathers up right in the belly. It's like the toxic wasteland. It's actually your body's way of trying to survive what's happening, because it's just being flooded by insulin. You're slowly becoming insulin resistant. It doesn't want you to become, toxic and suffer the consequences. So your body, in a very smart fashion, just puts it onto your belly. And insulin really, the other thing that people don't realize, insulin is really horrible for you on 2 fronts. One, it will keep you hungry all the time. So that's why I say when I select food, I'm either trying to select food, I'm either going to eat something that's going to keep me hungry all day, or I'm going to eat something that keeps me safe and neutral. So if you have a lot of insulin running through your body, you're going to feel hungry all the time. Second, and the reason for that is because your stomach creates 2 hormones, leptin and ghrelin. So ghrelin is what tells you that you're hungry, right? It's when your stomach's empty. It's very normal, natural. And then leptin is the one that says, hey, I'm full, stop eating. And what we've discovered is insulin will block leptin from hitting your brain. So even though you've eaten and you're full, your leptin is being blocked by that insulin to tell your brain stop eating. So that's why I carefully select my food that is not going to raise my insulin, and I can achieve something called appetite correction. Appetite correction because I'm eating whole natural foods and I'm not eating these chemically engineered substances that are going to mess up my hormones and mess up my sense of fullness. And that's why, I'm Italian. So you imagine giving up pasta, but there is no end for me with pasta. I can eat a bowl this big or I can eat a bowl that big. Like there's no full. And I used to say it all the time. I used to say this to doctors all the time. I don't have a full switch. It's broken. I don't know what happened, but it's totally not working for me. The truth was, and I've discovered this now working with addiction doctors, is it was the hormones. The hormones or the food and the way it affected my hormones that never allowed me to feel full.
Yeah, that's the part that people don't understand. So, the name of the summit is Right Mind, Right Weight. So there's so much more. Sometimes, there are things going on for people that are beyond their control. And so talk to me a little bit about, I work with emotional eaters and yo-yo dieters. And so the people who come to me, one, they want to lose weight. But second of all, it's, they have I call it the dieter's mindset or the dieter's mentality. They've been on and off diets. So it's like, they're either all in or all out. Do you know what I mean? And it's about the perfect plan and the right foods and so on. And if I only could, have more willpower. So it's about really a whole bunch of things that have nothing to do with food or willpower. And we try to take a deeper dive there. But with the people that I work with emotional eating, I do try to teach them moderation, like how much and how often, especially when it comes to foods that they love. So it's about not feeding their emotions, but feeding their hunger and making mindful choices if they want a cookie or some ice cream and that it's not an emotional choice. So whereas I try to teach them how to moderation and a mindfulness around that, food addicts really can't moderate. Can you talk to us a little bit about why moderation doesn't work for food addicts?
No, for sure. So moderation will never work for a food addict because then you get stuck into that addiction loop. And it sets up the whole chain of reaction in our brains. It sets up the phenomenon of craving. You can try, right? You can, I always say it always starts with, and so many people identify with this, they're like, oh, you know what? I'll just have a bite. This time it's different. I'll have a sliver of that piece of cake, just a sliver. And then they have the sliver. But what they don't realize, because now they think that that's them, they've blown it. They've set up the whole chain of reaction, neural pathways that have fired together, that have wired together, all this stuff that's happening behind the scenes. Then their next thought is, oh, I've blown it. I've totally blown it. I had some of the cake. So I might as well eat everything I can eat today because guess what? The diet's going to start tomorrow. And when the diet starts tomorrow, I'm going to eat salad for the rest of my life. So I better eat everything I can tonight, right? And I've known people who have been stuck in that addiction loop, not for years, but for decades, always thinking that tomorrow will be different. And so what I love about this summit, Right Mind, Right Weight, is that I try to help people shift their perception on certain foods and call food food. So those single ingredient foods, and of course, like yogurt and other things that have 3 or 4 ingredients that and you recognize. And then let's call the other stuff what it really is, that chemically engineered food-like substance, that poison, something that I cannot safely ingest because I am powerless over what happens when I ingest those. Similarly to someone who is anaphylactic against peanuts, right? It doesn't matter what they do or how they eat that peanut. If they ingest a peanut, their body's going to do something that they have no control over and they're not going to be safe. Of course, with food addiction, it's not that immediately life-threatening, but it is life-threatening. It will rob you of a life slowly and surely. And so I want to help people make that shift and really lift the veil behind the food industry so that you understand how you're being manipulated, what exactly they're doing. I don't see a difference between that and the cigarette industry. The cigarette industry knew they were making a highly addictive product that made you sick. The food industry knows they're making a highly addictive product that will make you sick. And they have a vested interest in you being morbidly obese because a morbidly obese person will buy more of it because they need more of it. And so once you start wrapping your mind around that and looking at those foods differently, having that shift in perception and seeing it as something that is killing me, because I don't want people to make decisions from like, oh, I can't, I'm missing out. God, I really want it. Don't. I want it to go to this empowered place of, I choose not to have that. The choice is mine. The power is mine. I don't want that. I love what I'm feeling right now. And the life that I have, it's not worth it. It's not worth it because for a food addict, that one cookie, that one bite could turn into a year-long relapse. And that certainly is part of my story. I've had 2 relapses and one relapse, and I say every relapse starts with a lie. Every single one of them. And even a craving is a lie, right? Just one bite, it'll be different this time. Go ahead, have some. It's always a lie. And for me, my lie started with, I'll just do it for the weekend. Just this one weekend. Yeah. And then Monday morning, I'll get back on track. Like I went to back to that diet mentality. And that weekend turned into almost a full year. Wow. And I did get pregnant and I gained 70 pounds, but you know what? It wasn't all baby. There was a lot. And so that's why it's very risky. Moderation is incredibly risky. I never tell people what they can or cannot eat, but to know what's risky. And so once the people I work with, patients, they've decided, look, I don't want to have sugar and flour. I get it. Like, I don't want that poison. I understand. Once they make that decision, I always say with their right mind, what are they left with? They're left with cravings and urges. That's all we're left with. And cravings and urges are almost like panic attacks. They're anxiety inducing because we know in the past what's happened. Like we've all been there. We've all done a diet. We've all done great. We're feeling great. We're looking great. Oh, then the craving comes and you start to panic. You really do, because you don't know what's going to happen. Am I going to give in this time? And if I give in, how long is it going to last? How bad am I going to feel? Like all that memory is still there. So that's why I give people 3 steps to overcoming a craving. The first one is you call it a lie. It's the schoolyard bully. When you call the schoolyard bully out, it starts to shrink. So as soon as that lie comes in, mine will say, oh, you're kind of hungry. Oh, you know what? You should have oh, maybe you should have oh, it's special. We're never going to be in this country. Lie. It's no matter what it is. And know what your lies are. Most people have, like, I would say between 5 and 8 lies that our little addictive voice tells us. I might as well. It's a special occasion. I can't hurt their feelings. It'll be different. The diet will start Monday. So you call it out. It's a lie, 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 lie. The next thing, because it is so the other thing that I remember before the deep breaths, it's a brain glitch. So for me, it really is a brain glitch. So not only am I, working against that dopamine rush that I want, but I also have created a habit, and these habits for decades, right? So I would be triggered and I would eat and then I'd feel numb. Trigger, eat, numb. And when those neurons fire together, they wire together, and our brains are very efficient. So even to this day, when I'm super stressed out, guess what my brain says? Oh, eat. Don't you remember? If you eat, then you feel numb and you'll be fine. And your brain wants you to be safe all the time. So I go, oh, here comes my brain glitch. And my brain glitch comes at various times. Sometimes it's loneliness. It could be 8 o'clock on a Friday night. My daughter's in bed. I'm like, oh, by myself. And my brain says, then eat. So it's a lie. It's a brain glitch. And lastly, you need something to ground yourself for the anxiety, which for me is 3 deep, and I mean deep belly breaths, like really inhaling a ton of oxygen. And what you're doing is you're giving oxygen to your brain, which is going to allow you to make better decisions. So if I can offer that to people listening, those 3 steps when you're faced with a craving, call it out as a lie, really understand it's a brain glitch. You can live through the pain of this. And lastly, getting grounded. And whether that's deep belly breaths, whether it's nature, a phone call, whatever it is that mitigates your anxiety, because you don't even know it, but you're feeling a ton of anxiety in that moment.
Yeah, no, that's great, because the truth is breathing. I often say to my clients, just exhale and imagine like this stress, like visualize it, just leaving your body, and just pay attention to when you do take those deep breaths and you're trying to calm yourself, how your body, you just feel different in your body when you're breathing. Because so many times, especially when we're anxious, we're not breathing. we think we're breathing, but we're holding our breath and our bodies feel tight and our shoulders up around our ears. But once you start to relax and you blow it out, you can really feel it. And if you visualize all of that stress, anxiety, and overwhelm leaving, it will bring a sense of calm. Right. So I think breathing is the best thing that you could tell people to do.
Yeah, and it's immediate and available to you. And you can do it without anyone even, you could be at a dinner party and the dessert's coming around the table and you're like, oh, this is a lie, I shouldn't have any. And then start your deep breathing. Nobody even needs to know. And you can imagine trying to make a decision under that, like what you mentioned, being really tight, shallow breathing, like stress. Like it's very hard to make a good decision. And your brain, path of least resistance, is going to go with what you've always done.
That's exactly right. Everybody's wanting you back to your comfort zone, back to what you know, back to something that you do without thinking, right? It's automatic pilot. So, Sandra, I mean, this is really such great information. And, you know, I really feel like for the people who are listening, who were trying to determine, am I an emotional eater? Do I just, you know, try to eat my feelings now and again? Or am I really a food addict? Can I, once I start, can I not stop? And it goes on for days and days and days. So I think, you know, being here with you today has probably really clarified it for a lot of people who are listening. And so if you feel like you do struggle with the true food addiction, Sandra has an amazing gift for you today. And Sandra, could you tell everybody a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'm so excited. So I hold weekend retreats in Ontario, and they're fabulous. We all go away for 3 days. And it's a chance to detox. It's a chance to restart or jumpstart your recovery, or even protect your recovery, because it's a lifelong journey. And so it's a very intimate group in Northern Ontario. We stay at a really great resort. We eat all our meals together. I show you how to weigh and measure your meals. And that could be something that you adapt into your lifestyle or not. So for example, myself, I weigh and measure when I'm at home, but I don't weigh and measure when I'm at restaurants, right? And so, but just to be introduced to that, to really start to feel the effects of having abundant food, feeling the effects of that appetite correction coming back, cravings start to extinguish, and we're in a safe environment. And it's a very beautifully structured day. The first night we get there, we get to know one another. The hotel puts on a bonfire for me. The weather's, agreeable. And, we just get to hear each other's stories and where we're at. And the next day, we have a good balance between lectures, downtime, some yoga, some nature walks, and we learn the science of food addiction. We really dive into the way your brain works. We talk about what to do with intense emotions. So a lot of times when you put the food down, the emotions come up. And sometimes, I say, if you want to know what drives you to eat, stop eating. And it'll all bubble up to the surface, right? And it's like, my toolbox. If you're like me, I didn't have any tools and I have to develop tools. Another big session is codependency. So a high number of addicts, and food addicts included, are codependent and don't even know it, don't understand that they should have healthy boundaries with friends and family. So we look at codependency, how to navigate relationships. We do mindfulness, we do mindful eating exercises. So it's a great weekend. And so I'm going to give away 2 spots, and you can learn more about my weekend at sandraelia.com. So it's sandraelia.com under retreats. The next one will be in January. The dates aren't set, but I do like to do January because everyone sort of has the holiday hangover. And I usually do it late January because at the beginning of January, most people think they're still going to find the magic diet. And usually by week 3, they realize, oh my God, I can't keep doing this. I can't go down this road anymore. I need something else. And then that's when I kind of welcome them with open arms. and so it would be great. I would love to have, so that would be the retreat without accommodations and food. So it would be the cost of the programming.
Oh, Sandra, that is so generous. It is truly so generous. And if those of you didn't get a chance to write down the link, it will be in the email that you received this morning announcing Sandra's interview. And so that is an amazing gift and an extremely generous offer. So thank you so much. And Sandra, it was a pleasure having you here today and finding out more. I mean, I got to learn more about what true food addiction is as well. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you for the work that you're doing. And thank you for this summit and bringing together professionals, because it is such a complex problem. I sit on the board of the Canadian Obesity Network, and we bring in doctors and dietitians and nutritionalists and fitness coaches and everything, because it is such a complex problem with not one easy answer. And so food addiction and the treatment for food addiction is one of the answers that works for many people. It's estimated 30% of all people who struggle with their weight are food addicted. Wow. So I thank you for bringing people together and for doing this summit and for giving me the chance to be a part of it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that very, very much. So you have a great rest of your day.
Yes.
And I'll speak to you soon. And bye, everybody.
Bye.